Everfree Guardian, Chapter 4, Part 3. Throwing his knee up, Nate managed to stun the dragon long enough to throw a punch. With his fist scraping across the dragon's jaw, he lifted up his own arm to block a counter. Wrapping the same around her neck, he pulled her to the right and punched down at her knee, making her grunt as she stepped back. Unable to see who he was facing, having lost the torch when he realized that they were coming, he was unaware of what he was truly dealing with. Hearing a huff from the dragoness, he lifted his leg up and countered the dragon's kick, which was much more powerful than Nate expected. Turning and throwing his other leg up, he smacked his boot against her temple, dazing her and allowing him to punch her again. As she staggered back, he rose the pistol, aiming for the dragon's chest.
Wait!
Nate froze as he recognized the voice that called to him, and the sweetness of the tone, the gentle nature that came with it. Looking over to his left, he found Fluttershy holding his torch. Turning forward, the flickering light illuminated enough of the room for him to identify who he was about to kill.
Boss?
Applejack blinked as she rubbed her cheek, looking up as she also found her old workers standing in front of her.
Nate? Y'all really are up here?
Nate lowered his pistol, taking another look at Fluttershy before refocusing on Applejack.
AJ, what are you two doing up here? It's too dangerous for either of you. There are dragons everywhere.
What are we doing? What are y'all doing up here, Sugarhun?
Fluttershy walked up to Nate, still holding the torch high.
We haven't seen you for 2 weeks. What happened? Are you okay?
He rose a hand up to the two.
I'm fine, just a little scraped up from the fight 2 weeks ago, but I lived.
He ushered back the way he came.
I was on my way back to my house after hunting out in the Everfree forest. Halfway back, I was ambushed by the dragons that are living on this mountain. One of them, a silver one, shoved me through a portal underneath the lake near my house and it teleported me a few levels up.
He turned back to the girls.
Do you two know what's happening? Why are the dragons here?
According to Twilight, these here vermin followed an adult dragon to this mountain. They've been causing a mess around these parts while the big fella's sleeping. His nap is what's causing the smoke clouds.
Shit. And you two are up here because...
Fluttershy pointed up at the ceiling.
Twilight and a few other friends of ours went on ahead up to the levels above. We got separated when a bunch of dragons fell from the mountain.
Nate grimaced, wondering if those dragons were the bodies that he threw over when fighting the creatures back on his escape. He listened as Applejack continued for Fluttershy.
Twilight's somewhere up there waiting for us. We're heading back up to wake the big guy up and get him to hightail us somewhere else for his nap. If we don't go...
Nate glanced at the floor when AJ went silent, the insinuation of what could happen crystal clear to all three of them. Shaking his head, Nate pointed to the stairs.
Well, I'm not sure what I could do, but that stairwell leads to the cave above. Most of the dragons have been cleared out already, so you should have no problem making it up to them if you stick close to the path.
What, y'all not coming with us?
He shrugged in response.
What more can I do? My bullets can't penetrate a fully grown dragon's scales. I've only been able to take the young ones along the way, thankfully, but aside from covering fire for them, I don't see what I can do to help you on your journey. Besides...
He looked towards the dark walls.
I have a feeling I have a mission of my own.
Fluttershy hovered the torch to the side, letting it light up the wall. A loud gasp came from her as Applejack's jaw dropped. The two of them saw the dragon's prizes chained and bound to the walls in stakes.
Sweet Celestia. What in tarnation?
Nate walked back over to the tied-up ponies, checking another, as Fluttershy drifted the light to all corners of the room. It was horrifying for her to see so many mares, at least 30 in bulk, imprisoned in this room, where all they could look forward to was the next dragon to use them. Applejack was faring no better, as her nerves were rattled.
What in the Sam hell is all this?
She stormed over to one of the girls on the other side, while Nate checked the stable one of the ponies was tied to. After careful consideration, he came to a conclusion.
This room is a breeding ground.
Fluttershy's ears twitched at that, her terrified look gaining a hint of confusion as she turned to Nate.
What? But dragons can't breed with ponies, it's impossible! Dragons can only come from dragon eggs, like by the female demographic of their kind.
Then how do you explain all the signs around the room, Flutters, or the stocks these ponies are locked in? Either they found a way, or this room is just a place for them to... cut loose.
Applejack clenched her teeth as she seethed, bundling her hands up into fists.
Goddamn bastards, I recognize some of these ponies from neighboring towns of Ponyville. There's even a few here from Appaloosa.
Yeah, these ponies must have been captured when the young ones raided settlements after establishing the territory here. Don't know how long they've been here, but... their conditions are deteriorating every hour they stay here.
Nate stood back up, taking a step back and throwing his foot forward. The mare in the stock yiped as the lock was kicked off, the shackles undoing from her neck and letting her drop to the ground. Helping her sit up against the wall, he looked back at Fluttershy and Applejack.
I'll freight these mares and get them down to Ponyville. There's a hospital there, right?
Applejack nodded.
Yeah, just take them to the northwest side of town. Hospital's 2 blocks from the shopping district.
Fluttershy hovered over to him as she handed them the torch.
There's the cart outside. It looks to be how the dragons got the mares here in the first place. Maybe you can use that to get them to town?
Nate nodded, standing back up as he went to free another.
Yeah, good thinking. I'll round them up in the cart and escort them to the edge of town. From there, I'll get some ponies to take them in. Odds are the younglings aren't gonna like their prizes being stolen from them, and if you need any supporting fire...
He drew out his Remington rifle, loading a bullet into the chamber as he racked it.
I'll be able to snipe anything out of your way if you get into any trouble.
Thank you, Sugar Hun. We'll do our best up there. Good luck to you.
Fluttershy flew after Applejack as she raced for the stairs. Looking back at Nate as he freed another mare, she gave him a sideways glare.
After we're done here, you and I are going to have a very long chat, mister.
Nate looked up at her and then turned away slightly as he went back to freeing the mares. With Fluttershy leaving him behind, he was about halfway through getting all of them out before more commotion came. Some dragons that followed them up were now at the entrance, enraged that he was taking away their breeding mares. Setting the pony that he had off to the side, Nate wielded the torch like a club, wielding it in his right hand as he put away the pistol for a moment. The fire itself wasn't what he was betting on when combating these beasts. After all, he breathed it. No. He wanted to make them hurt, to cave in their skulls painfully and watch them slowly hemorrhage on the floor. Swinging upwards with the torch, he cracked one dragon's jaw to the left. Swinging back down, he cracked down onto the skull of the second dragon, creating a nice dent on the top of his head as he toppled over with a home run to his chest. Turning around as more came in and circled him, he swung wildly, classing his fiery club with a shield made of another dragon's scales. Why they would use their own kind's remains to make weapons boggled Nate's mind, but at this point, he didn't really care. Charging the dragon holding it, he bumped the shield aside and stabbed a splinter into his eye, making him roar in agony, as he dropped the shield and clutched his eye. Dropping the torch and taking up the shield, Nate used it to block the oncoming fire breath of another dragon, falling back from the pressure of the heat. When he had his opening, he struck, punching in the dragon's muzzle with the shield, while another lunged for him. After taking a few hits, the human bucked forward and knocked the fucker out with a curb stomp when he was on his back. Tossing down the shield, Nate finished the job by shooting the dragon he got in the eye, ensuring none got back up to fight again. When he had the chance of silence, he unshackled the rest of the women, and hoisted them all outside one by one. Some of them fought, or screamed when he touched them, but he was left with no other options. Those still coherent enough to understand what was happening around them didn't resist. Seeing him fighting off the dragons that imprisoned them had them figure that he was there to rescue them, and that assumption was correct. Loading the pop singer on last, Nate shot the back of the cart and walked to the front. Looking down the slope, the edge was going to provide a bit of an issue. If he couldn't turn the cart or direct it in some way, there was no feasible way Nate could use it to extract all of these mares from the Everfree mountain. Going back into the cave, Nate had a light bulb go off of his head when he picked up one of the loosened shackles. If he couldn't drag the cart along, then perhaps it was time that he made his own iteration of car in this universe. Taking up all the chains that he could, he walked back outside and began wrapping them around the front two wheels, attaching them to the bar that turned them. Securing them with the cuffs, Nate climbed aboard after giving the cart a push, taking up the bar and glancing back as they slowly cruised along. As they began their descent and sped up, a thought occurred to Nate.
Shit, did I forget about the brakes?
5 seconds later gave him his answer.
Fuck!
With Applejack and Fluttershy reuniting with the rest of the main six, the adventure up the mountain was quieter than they initially suspected. Fluttershy and Applejack from their previous encounter with the Everfree human understood why there was a lack of younglings in their way, and furthermore, why most of the ones that they came across were dead or dying. Nate must have been warped about halfway up and fought his way down. This was good for the girls. It meant that they didn't have to unnecessarily risk their lives on top of dealing with the fully grown dragon itself. Shuffling along and overcoming environmental hurdles along the way, they began to see living teenagers the closer they got to their destination. Needless to say, they weren't happy with them intruding, nor were they pleased that the main six got as far as they did. With their magic and separate talents, the dragons that they came across were dispelled easily enough. The groups that they came in were usually no more than 5 or 6 of them. Plenty to deal with safely thanks to Rainbow's speed, Applejack's strength, Pinky's unpredictability, and Twilight's magic. Although one time they did find themselves overwhelmed. A larger group of a dozen had them cornered, backed up against the mountain as they went on about how they were going to break them in the breeding room below. With Applejack and Fluttershy already knowing what goes on there, they didn't want that chance joining the mares Nate rescued, and they didn't have to. The whizzing sound of something cutting through the air was the first and last thing one of the dragons heard, before a bullet went right through his skull. With his body dropping onto the ground, the others turned and looked down towards the forest below. Applejack and Fluttershy smiled, or the former's case smirked as they saw Nate riding off through the Everfree forest with a cart full of the newly freed ponies. In his hand was his sniper rifle, the barrel lowering as he dropped it into the cart and turned back around, steering the cargo away from the trees. Hissing, the dragons tailed after him, giving the ponies the chance they needed to continue on ahead. Fluttershy spared a look down towards Nate as the other 11 dragons were flying after him, but followed after Applejack soothed her along, guaranteeing their friend's ability to look out for himself. After a few more levels, Rainbow Dash stole a glance back at Fluttershy, pursing her lips as she went up to Twilight.
Still think it was a good idea to bring Fluttershy? We're about to find out, Rainbow.
The purple unicorn pointed to the last cave the path led to, easily the largest of the many that they traversed through and the pinpointed source of the smog rolling over the kingdom.
We're here.
Nate looked up from his scope as he fired a sniper shot at the dragon surrounding his friends. Watching as the bullet traveled, he waited the 2 seconds it would take for it to connect, and when it did, he smiled. Haha, bullseye! Fuck it! And then he promptly turned that smile upside down when seeing 11 dragons racing towards them from the sky. Oh shit. Tossing a sniper into the cart, Nate jumped back up to the front and took the bar, steering the car through the forest path as the dragons were catching up to them. Ducking a stream of fire whirled past his head, he pulled out his revolver as 3 managed to make their way around to the front. Blasting them out of the sky like clay pigeons, he turned his head back to see where the rest of them were. Finding the lot of them still catching up, he let go of the bar and ran to the back, taking out his pistol and firing it in the general direction of the flying lizards, while picking them off with the 3 bullets that he had left in his revolver. Reloading both weapons as 4 went down, 2 being taken out with 1 bullet, he saw that one of the 4 remaining dragons attempting to board from the side. Kicking him in his wing and crunching it over the edge of the cart, he let the drake collapse into the dirt and crushing himself into meat on impact with a tree. Opening fire at the other 3, he spread them out, and kept them off of him long enough for him to take up one of the shackles stored on the cart. Wrapping one end around his arm, he twirled it around and threw it up at the dragoness, leading the other 2, bringing her down and holding her in a chokehold with his gun's barrel pressed into her chin. Glaring at the other 2 dragons who backed off when seeing their leading grace at a threat of dying, their hesitance left them open to be killed by a few well-placed shots. And before the dragoness could fight back, she was thrown off in front of the cart, where she fell over to the side and was run over by nearly 1,000 pounds worth of mares and metal. As she was left in the dirt, Nate resumed steering the cart, sure that the threat had passed. Now all that's left is to get the mares to Ponyville and let the residents lead them to a doctor or a therapist. They'll be able to take it from there after he's done his part. Nate widened his eyes when hearing that familiar roar of a larger, much deadlier beast. Turning his head back, he saw the silver dragon coming back at them in bulk, his speed far superior than the cart. Oh, give me a fucking break! Nate let the bar go after reaching another decline, turning back and drawing out his Mossberg. Racking it and waiting for the dragon to get closer, he fired a shell in its face, damaging some of the scales but otherwise leaving it unharmed. Racking and shooting twice more made it fall back, giving him room to steer and maneuver around the forest. Ponyville was so close now, but he can't lead this monster there. It would cause unending havoc for the little town if he fails to end it right here. Loading 3 more shells, Nate prepared himself as it was coming around for another sweep. Picking up his rifle, he peered through the scope and sniped it in its joint of its left wing, hoping to deter it by taking out its means to fly. This worked, but not as well as he'd hoped. The silver dragon lingered back, slowing up as the bullet made contact with his wing, but it was still airborne and still coming. Cursing under his breath, he fired his shotgun again as it got close, nearly getting crushed in the process as the shell hit his throat. Turns out the underside of the dragon was weaker than the scales covering the rest of it, but Nate wasn't betting his survival on that advantage alone. He had to keep the heat up and steer this cart into Ponyville. Trying to wait and hit its weak spot will not work fast enough. Pushing it back with a few more shotgun shells to the muzzle, he eyed the surroundings ahead, seeing a few trees that he could squeeze through. Maneuvering the cart into the desired direction, he prayed that he'd be fast enough before the silver dragon caught up. And with a violent crack of wood and rock, Nate's prayers were answered. The silver dragon was trapped, his neck locked under 2 Everfree trees as they grew unnaturally around him. With Nate's destination in sight, he didn't dare to look back to see what the forest had in store for the dragon's fate. Odds are the forest will consume the beast, and leave behind nothing but a few scales as evidence that he was there. Honestly, with how Nate's been surviving, he learned to steer clear of the more ragged-looking trees, especially those with faces on them. Now in the home stretch, Nate pulled the bar back and yanked on the chains, breaking the front wheels and slowing the cart to a stop just outside of Ponyville. Taking a breath as the threat was over and done with, he turned to the girls in the cart. There were about 30 or so with him. No doubt the dragons had more that he couldn't get to, but he was upset that there would be potential victims on higher levels that he couldn't get to. But for now, he was satisfied for those that he'd already saved. Jumping down, he marched to the back and pulled the bed down, attracting the attention of those still in their right mind. He motioned for them to come out, walking to the left as they followed them. Like puppets or lost dogs, the broken mares followed after, staying behind them as he pointed into the town. Go through the shopping district up ahead, then turn left. The hospital is just a few blocks away. The coherent girls nodded, looking into the town itself before covering their bodies. Leading the others in, Nate stood by and let them go, watching as they earned the stares of those wandering the streets of Ponyville but were still left undisturbed as they moved along. The pop singer looked back, as she was the last to follow, her eyes still obscured by her passionate hairstyle. Her smile was filled with hope, with gratitude. Because of Nate, they won't suffer the same fate as others captured by the dragons would. While true he couldn't save them all, she was glad that he was able to save them at least. Thinking on what her next song would be, she peered up at a rainbow, while her thoughts drifted to the human, her lyrics twisting to center towards both subjects.
I know you are a special one. Some see crazy where I see love. You fall so low, but shoot so high.
She giggled to herself as she caught up with the rest, disappearing into Ponyville while Nate turned and went back towards the Everfree, sticking to the tree line after gathering up his weapons. Sighing in relief, he allowed himself to relax, yawning as he rounded the forest and made his way towards the trail leading to his home, and Fluttershy's cottage. Alright, now time to deal with a pissed-off shy mare. Oh boy. Well, at least he has enough time to prepare for whatever onslaught of conversation's gonna occur. Anyways, let's get on to our brave donators. Top donators are 630, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, and Only One Thing. Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rollins, Crazy Killer 557, Stu Hex, Will, Omicron Lyre, Chris, Twinkie, Dospo, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, Rinzith 9852, Madman Stan, Leslie Perkett, Drake Lovedragon, Hansa Norman, Stephen Bingham, Linega 12, Sorcerer Constantine, Hud Zaza, Conver, and many more superb people. Thank you all very much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.